The air hummed with champagne-fueled laughter and soft classical music as guests milled about Logan Hunter's opulent home. The anniversary celebration for Hunter Dynamics' record-breaking merger was in full swing, with Manhattan's elite packed into every corner of his penthouse. Logan, the formidable CEO, wore his success like armor, his tailored tuxedo and confident smile reflecting the power he wielded over his empire. But beneath the polished exterior, a quiet unease stirred. Elena, his wife of 15 years, moved effortlessly through the crowd, her crimson dress hugging her figure perfectly as she exchanged pleasantries with senators, tech moguls, and celebrities. She was radiant, the picture of elegance, her laugh lighting up every conversation she joined. Logan's colleagues often joked that Elena was his secret weapon, her charm disarming even the sharpest critics. Yet tonight, as Logan observed her from across the room, something felt off. Her smile seemed practiced, her laughter a touch too bright. And there was that look she gave Garrett, Logan's longtime business partner, a flicker of familiarity that set his nerves alight. Logan wasn't a man prone to paranoia. His success was built on analytical precision, an ability to see patterns others missed. But lately, Elena's behavior had become a puzzle he couldn't solve. Her sudden interest in golf was the most perplexing piece. She had never shown an ounce of enthusiasm for the sport, yet in recent weeks she'd purchased clubs, booked lessons, and spoken incessantly about perfecting her swing. Logan had even arranged for her to join an exclusive country club, proud to support what he assumed was a new hobby. Yet doubts crept in. Elena had begun spending long hours at the club, often returning with vague stories about her day. When Logan had suggested joining her for a round, she'd deflected with a warm smile and a quick excuse about needing me time. At first, he'd dismissed his unease as a side effect of his own grueling schedule. But tonight, as she lingered by Garrett's side, laughing at something he said, Logan couldn't ignore the nagging suspicion that something wasn't right. The first crack had appeared 2 weeks ago during a casual dinner at home. Elena had been texting under the table, her lips curving into a soft smile as her fingers danced across the screen. Logan, curious, had asked who she was talking to. She'd glanced up, startled, before quickly answering, "Just a friend from the club." Her tone had been light, but the way she avoided his gaze had planted the first seed of doubt. That seed had grown tonight, watered by the subtle shifts in her demeanor and the unspoken tension that seemed to hang between her and Garrett. As Logan moved through the crowd, greeting guests and making polite conversation, his mind raced. Could he be imagining things? Or was there more to Elena's newfound independence than met the eye? It was Garrett's toast that finally tipped the scales. Raising his glass, Garrett grinned and said, "To Logan, a man who not only conquers the business world, but has a knack for picking the finest partners, both in business and in life." The room erupted in applause, but Logan caught the faint smirk that played on Garrett's lips as he glanced at Elena. She smiled back, her expression unreadable, and Logan's stomach churned. Later that evening, as the last of the guests filtered out and Elena disappeared into the bedroom, Logan found himself staring out at the city skyline. His reflection in the glass was a reminder of the life he'd built, the sacrifices he'd made to get here. But for the first time, he felt an unfamiliar crack in his foundation, a sense that the people closest to him might not be as loyal as he believed. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd visit the country club unannounced. If Elena was truly spending her afternoons working on her swing, there would be no harm in surprising her. But if his suspicions were correct, this visit would be the first step in uncovering the truth. As the city lights twinkled below, Logan's jaw tightened. He wasn't just a man who thrived on control, he demanded it, and if something or someone was threatening the life he'd built, he would find out, whatever it took. Logan arrived at the Willow Creek Country Club just as the sun began to peek over the horizon. The serene, manicured lawn seemed out of place for what he anticipated might be an unsettling morning. His black sedan stood out among the sea of luxury SUVs and convertibles, each belonging to the elite members who frequented the club. Normally, Logan found this setting uninteresting, a playground for trust fund babies and retired CEOs. But today, it was a battlefield. His plan was simple: observe, confirm, and, if necessary, confront. He wasn't sure what he'd find, but the thought of Elena laughing by a golf cart, her phone buzzing with hidden messages, had driven him here. She'd left home early this morning, her enthusiasm palpable as she kissed him goodbye. "I'll be back by lunch," she had promised. Logan had only nodded, his own plan already in motion. As he walked into the clubhouse, Logan noticed the receptionist's practiced smile falter when she recognized him. He was rarely here, but his status as a VIP member preceded him. "Good morning, Mr. Hunter," she greeted, her voice warm but cautious. "Are you here to play today?" "I'm here." "No," he replied, offering a polite smile. "I'm just here to watch. My wife is on the course and I thought I'd surprise her." The receptionist hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Of course. Do you need assistance finding her?" Logan shook his head. "I'll manage. Thank you." He made his way toward the lounge overlooking the driving range, taking care to stay out of sight. The course was sprawling, and from his vantage point, he could see clusters of players scattered across the green expanse. He scanned the horizon, searching for Elena's familiar figure. It didn't take long. She was near the fifth hole, leaning against a golf cart, her posture relaxed and casual. She wasn't alone. Garrett stood beside her, dressed in a crisp polo shirt and khakis, his stance as familiar to Logan as his own reflection. They were laughing, her head tilted back, his hand resting briefly on the golf cart's frame. The scene felt too intimate, too natural, and it hit Logan like a punch to the gut. Logan's first instinct was to storm out there and demand answers, but he resisted. He needed more than suspicion. He needed proof. Pulling out his phone, he snapped a few pictures from his discreet vantage point. The camera captured the way Elena leaned toward Garrett, the way he brushed her shoulder as he pointed out something on the course. The ease between them was undeniable. For the next hour, Logan followed them from a careful distance, his sharp mind cataloging every detail. Their playful banter, the shared smiles, the moments when they stood too close, it all painted a picture he couldn't ignore. But it wasn't just the personal betrayal that gnawed at him. Garrett wasn't just a friend. He was his business partner, someone Logan had trusted with the most sensitive aspects of hunter dynamics. If Garrett was capable of crossing personal boundaries, what else was he capable of? As Elena and Garrett moved to the ninth hole, Logan decided he'd seen enough. He retreated to the clubhouse, his heart pounding with a mix of fury and determination. He needed time to process, to plan his next move. Confrontation was inevitable, but it had to be on his terms. Back at home, Logan sat in his office, staring at the photos he'd taken. The evidence was damning, but it wasn't enough. He needed to understand the full scope of their relationship, to uncover whether it was limited to personal betrayal or if it extended into the professional realm. His analytical mind took over, transforming his anger into action. He began to comb through Garrett's recent activity, emails, meetings, financial transactions, using the tools at his disposal to search for anomalies. Within hours, a pattern emerged. Garrett had been meeting with a venture capitalist Logan had rejected during the merger talks, a man named Victor Lang. Lang was known for his underhanded tactics, often partnering with insiders to destabilize companies before swooping in with an offer to help rebuild. The pieces began to fall into place. If Garrett was colluding with Lang, it could explain some of the unexplained shifts in company finances Logan had noticed, but dismissed as routine. Elena's role in this, however, remained murky. Was she a willing participant in whatever scheme Garrett was orchestrating, or was she simply a pawn in his game? The thought of her complicity made Logan's chest tighten, but he refused to jump to conclusions. He needed answers, and he knew exactly how to get them. That evening, Logan returned home to find Elena in the kitchen preparing dinner. She greeted him with a warm smile, her demeanor as cheerful as ever. "You're home early," she said, pouring him a glass of wine. "How was your day?" Logan studied her carefully, noting the slight tension in her shoulders and the way she avoided meeting his gaze for too long. "Busy," he replied, keeping his tone neutral. "But productive." "You?" They ate in near silence, the clinking of silverware the only sound between them. Logan's mind raced, formulating his strategy. He couldn't afford to tip his hand too early. Instead, he decided to bait her, to see if she'd reveal anything under pressure. "I was thinking about taking up golf," he said casually, breaking the silence. "You've been talking about it so much, I thought it might be fun to join you." Elena's hand froze mid-air, her fork hovering above her plate. "Really?" she asked, her tone light but slightly strained. "I didn't think it was your kind of thing." "I've been reconsidering," Logan said, watching her reaction closely. Maybe we could play together this weekend." The possibility of their having fun together soothed him. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she quickly recovered. "That sounds great," she said, but her voice lacked enthusiasm. "Let me check my schedule." "If I'm not too busy," Logan nodded, his suspicions deepening. Whatever she was hiding, it was clear she wasn't ready to share it. But that was fine. Logan was patient. He'd built his empire on patience and precision, and he would use those same skills to unravel the web of deceit surrounding him. Later that night, as Elena slept beside him, Logan stared at the ceiling, his mind a whirlwind of plans and possibilities. He couldn't afford to let emotions cloud his judgment. The stakes were too high, both personally and professionally. If Garrett and Elena were working together, their betrayal could have devastating consequences. But Logan wasn't the type to crumble under pressure. He thrived in chaos, and this was no different. Tomorrow, he would take the next step in his investigation. He would confront Garrett indirectly, probing for weaknesses and inconsistencies. And if Elena continued to evade his questions, he'd find another way to uncover the truth. One thing was certain, Logan Hunter was not a man to be underestimated, and whoever thought they could betray him without consequence was about to learn just how wrong they were. The following morning, Logan left for the office earlier than usual. The city was still waking up, its streets bathed in the soft glow of dawn, but Logan's mind was already racing. His suspicions about Elena and Garrett had solidified overnight, but he still lacked the full picture. To reclaim control, he needed more than circumstantial evidence. He needed indisputable proof of their betrayal. Logan started his day in the war room of his empire, his office. Floor-to-ceiling screens displayed live data streams, financial reports, and project updates. He logged into his private system, a secure network only he could access, and began his deep dive into Garrett's activities. The anomalies he'd noticed before, irregular meeting schedules, unusual vendor payments, became clearer as he mapped them out. Garrett wasn't just scheming, he was actively diverting company resources into a shell corporation. The shell company was registered under an alias, but Logan's digging revealed connections to Victor Lang. Transactions funneled through multiple layers of accounts, all led back to Garrett's fingerprints. Each revelation was another dagger in Logan's back, the betrayal cutting deeper the further he investigated. His longtime partner, a man he had considered a brother, was siphoning off the lifeblood of the company they had built together. But Garrett wasn't working alone. Elena's name appeared, not in the financial documents, but in communications tied to the scheme. Emails between Garrett and a personal account linked to her contained coded language about closing the deal and managing logistics. They spoke of trust, discretion, and even planned meetings, some of which coincided suspiciously with her golf lessons. Logan clenched his fists as he read. It wasn't just an affair. Elena was actively aiding Garrett in undermining him, both personally and professionally. The betrayal wasn't just a knife to the heart, it was an assault on everything he had built, everything he had trusted. Yet Logan wasn't one to react in the heat of the moment. He would strike back, but it would be calculated and devastating. Later that afternoon, Logan called a meeting with Garrett. They hadn't spoken directly in weeks, as Garrett had been busy managing logistics related to the merger. Logan suspected this distance had been intentional, a strategy to keep him from noticing the cracks. Today, however, Logan intended to change that. Garrett arrived at Logan's office with his usual swagger, his confident smile barely hiding the tension in his eyes. Logan gestured for him to sit, keeping his own expression neutral. "We need to talk about the next phase of the merger," Logan began, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were documents he had prepared, dummy files, meant to bait Garrett into revealing more of his plans. Garrett flipped through them, nodding. "Everything looks solid. What specifically do you want to discuss?" Logan leaned back in his chair, his piercing gaze locked onto Garrett. "I've been reviewing some financial irregularities. A few payments don't align with our projected expenses." Garrett's smile faltered, but only for a second. Probably just vendor delays or clerical errors. I'll have the accounting team look into it." Logan didn't blink. "I already did." For a moment, the room was silent, the tension thick enough to cut. Garrett's facade cracked ever so slightly, his confidence giving way to unease. Logan didn't press further. He wanted to plant a seed of fear, to let Garrett wonder just how much he knew. That evening, Logan shifted his focus to Elena. Her betrayal was more personal, more painful, but it demanded the same level of precision. Confronting her without definitive proof could backfire, giving her the chance to manipulate the narrative. Instead, he decided to set a trap. "Dinner tomorrow night," Logan suggested casually as they prepared for bed. "Just the two of us. It's been a while since we had time to ourselves." Elena hesitated, her hands pausing mid-motion as she folded a sweater. "That sounds nice," she said, her tone light but guarded. "Where do you want to go?" "Surprise me," Logan replied, feigning disinterest. "You always pick the best places." The next day, Logan called in a favor from an old friend who owned a private security firm. If Elena was meeting with Garrett, Victor Lang, or anyone else involved in the scheme, he needed concrete evidence. He handed over the details of her car, phone, and usual haunts, instructing the team to monitor her movements discreetly. By the time Logan arrived at the restaurant Elena had chosen, he already had a preliminary report from the security team. She had visited a boutique hotel earlier in the day, meeting with Garrett in a private suite for nearly 2 hours. They had exited separately, their movements calculated to avoid suspicion. The betrayal was no longer theoretical. It was reality, stark and undeniable. At dinner, Logan played his part flawlessly. He was attentive, charming, and even playful, masking the storm brewing inside him. Elena seemed at ease, her guard down as she sipped her wine and recounted her day. Logan studied her closely, noting the subtle shifts in her expression, the pauses in her speech, when she chose her words too carefully. By the time dessert arrived, Logan had heard enough. He decided to press her, gently at first, to see how far she'd go to maintain her facade. "You've been spending a lot of time at the club," he remarked, his tone casual. "Making new friends?" Elena smiled, her expression unreadable. "A few. Everyone there is so welcoming." "Have you seen Gareth there?" Logan asked, watching her reaction closely. Elena hesitated for a fraction of a second before shaking her head. "Not really. Why?" Logan's jaw tightened, but he forced a smile. "Just curious." When they returned home, Logan retreated to his office under the guise of catching up on work. In reality, he was reviewing the security team's full report. It included photos of Elena and Garrett at the hotel, their body language confirming what the emails had implied. The depth of their betrayal was staggering, but Logan felt no impulse to lash out. Instead, he felt a cold determination settle over him. He spent the next several hours crafting his response. Revenge wasn't about immediate gratification. It was about reclaiming power and control. Garrett's shell corporation, Elena's complicity, Victor Lang's involvement. Each piece was a lever Logan could pull to dismantle their plans and rebuild his own position. By the time the sun began to rise, Logan had outlined his strategy. It was a multi-pronged attack, financial, personal, and psychological. He would expose Garrett's corruption to the board, ensuring his ouster while safeguarding the company's reputation. Elena's role would remain a secret, for now. Logan would confront her privately, offering her a single chance to come clean. Whether she took it or not would determine her place in his life moving forward. As the city woke up around him, Logan felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in weeks. The betrayal had shaken him to his core, but it hadn't broken him. If anything, it had reminded him of who he was, a man who thrived under pressure, who turned adversity into opportunity. And as for Elena and Garrett, they had underestimated him, mistaking his silence for ignorance. Soon they would learn the truth. Logan Hunter was a force to be reckoned with, and his revenge would be as precise as it was inevitable. The following days were a flurry of calculated moves, each designed to dismantle Garrett's and Elena's schemes while maintaining Logan's control over the narrative. If they thought they could pull off their betrayal unnoticed, they were about to realize just how ruthlessly thorough he could be. Logan began with Garrett. Knowing the board of Hunter Dynamics valued stability above all else, Logan carefully laid the groundwork to reveal Garrett's duplicity. He started by compiling a detailed dossier, including financial records, email exchanges, and evidence of Garrett's meetings with Victor Lang. Every piece of information was cross-referenced and documented, ensuring there were no gaps for Garrett to exploit. Then Logan called a meeting with the board. It was an emergency session under the guise of reviewing potential risks to the company post-merger. Garrett entered the boardroom confidently, flashing his trademark grin. But as Logan began his presentation, that grin quickly faded. "We've uncovered some irregularities," Logan announced, his tone neutral but commanding. He clicked through a series of slides showing discrepancies in vendor payments, shell corporations, and unauthorized transactions. Each revelation was met with murmurs of concern from the board members. Logan glanced at Garrett, whose face had gone pale. As for the murmuring, to be clear, Logan continued, his gaze locked on his former partner, these aren't mere clerical errors. They're deliberate acts designed to siphon company funds into an external entity. He let the weight of his words hang in the air before delivering the final blow. And the evidence points to Garrett's direct involvement. Garrett stammered, trying to defend himself, but Logan had anticipated every excuse. The board, furious and blindsided, demanded Garrett step down immediately. Logan maintained his composure, offering reassurances about the company's resilience and promising a thorough internal audit. It was a masterclass in corporate strategy, methodical, unrelenting, and devastatingly effective. With Garrett neutralized, Logan turned his attention to Elena. This confrontation wasn't about evidence or strategy. It was about closure. For all her duplicity, Logan still needed to hear her version of the truth, to understand why she had betrayed him. That evening, he invited Elena to join him in the study, a room she rarely entered. It was a space dominated by leather-bound books and a massive oak desk, the embodiment of Logan's authority. She hesitated at the door, her posture tense. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice cautious. Logan gestured for her to sit. He didn't speak immediately, instead letting the silence stretch. When he finally broke it, his voice was calm but cold. "I know about you and Garrett." Elena's eyes widened, her composure faltering for the first time. "Don't lie to me," he interrupted, his tone sharp. "I've seen the photos, I've read the emails. I know everything." She froze, the weight of his words crashing down on her. For a moment she looked as though she might deny it, but then her shoulders slumped, and she exhaled shakily. I didn't want it to happen this way," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Logan's jaw tightened. "You didn't want it to happen this way? What exactly did you want, Elena? To destroy everything we've built while I stood by, clueless?" "Yes." Tears filled her eyes, but Logan felt no sympathy. This wasn't about emotion, it was about accountability. "Why?" he demanded. "Why him? Why betray me like this?" Elena wiped her eyes, struggling to find the right words. "It wasn't about you, Logan. It was about me. I felt invisible. You were so consumed with work, with the company, with being perfect, that I started to feel like a ghost in my own life. Garrett was there. He noticed me." Her confession hit Logan harder than he expected, but it didn't absolve her. "So your solution was to sabotage our marriage and my company?" he asked bitterly. "Was it worth it?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't know about the business side of it until recently. Garrett used me." Logan studied her, searching for any sign of sincerity. "You're telling me you had no idea he was stealing from the company?" "I swear," she pleaded, "I was stupid and selfish, but I didn't know he was doing that. I didn't know until it was too late." For a moment, Logan considered her words. He wasn't sure he believed her entirely, but he also knew she wasn't the mastermind. Garrett was the architect of this betrayal, and Elena had been a pawn in his game. Still, her choices had consequences. "I've already dealt with Garrett," Logan said, his voice steely. "He's out of the company. As for you, we're done." Elena's breath hitched. "Logan, please. I can fix this. I'll do anything." He shook his head. "You made your choice, Elena. Now you'll live with it." While Logan's personal life crumbled, his professional focus never wavered. With Garrett gone, he turned his attention to Victor Lang, the opportunist who had orchestrated the corporate attack. Logan knew Lang would attempt to exploit the chaos, so he preemptively launched a counterstrike. He called in favors from allies in the industry, leaking selective information about Lang's unethical practices to the media. Within days, articles exposing Lang's history of corporate sabotage began circulating. Investors pulled out of his projects, and regulators started investigations. Lang's empire began to collapse under the weight of its own corruption. Simultaneously, Logan strengthened Hunter Dynamics, implementing safeguards to prevent future breaches and reassuring stakeholders of the company's stability. His leadership during the crisis earned him renewed respect from the board and the confidence of his employees. Logan was no longer just a powerful CEO. He was a survivor, a man who had weathered betrayal and emerged stronger. The climactic twist. Just as Logan began to feel a sense of resolution, an unexpected twist threw everything into chaos. A package arrived at his office, containing a flash drive and an anonymous note. "You don't know the full story." Curious but cautious, Logan inserted the drive into his computer. The files contained surveillance footage of Garrett and Victor Lang meeting with a third party, a woman whose face was obscured, but whose voice was unmistakable. Elena. The recordings revealed that she had known about the financial scheme from the start. In fact, she had introduced Garrett to Lang, setting the entire betrayal in motion. Her earlier plea of ignorance had been a calculated lie, a desperate attempt to salvage her position after being caught. Logan's hands trembled as he watched. The betrayal was deeper than he had imagined, more calculated and cruel. Elena hadn't just been a pawn, She had been a co-conspirator, fully complicit in Garrett's plot to destroy him. Armed with this new evidence, Logan's resolve hardened. He confronted Elena one final time, presenting her with the recordings. Her reaction was one of shock and despair, but Logan had no patience for her tears. "You had your chance to come clean," he said coldly. "Now, you'll face the consequences." He filed for divorce the next day, ensuring the settlement would leave her with nothing more than the bare minimum. Simultaneously, he handed over the recordings to his legal team, initiating proceedings to press charges against both Garrett and Elena for fraud and conspiracy. As the dust settled, Logan stood, alone but unbroken. His empire was intact, his enemies vanquished, and his name cleared. Yet a shadow lingered, a reminder that trust, once shattered, could never be fully repaired. Justice had been served, but at a cost. Logan had reclaimed his power, but the scars of betrayal would remain, a constant reminder of the fragility of even the most carefully constructed lives. The courtroom was silent, the air heavy with anticipation as the judge delivered the final verdict. Logan sat stoically at the plaintiff's table, his face unreadable as the gavel struck. Garrett was sentenced to prison for embezzlement, conspiracy, and fraud, while Elena received a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation that incriminated Victor Lang further. Logan had ensured there were no loopholes, no loose ends, only the justice he had pursued with meticulous precision. But as the doors to the courthouse swung open and Logan stepped outside, a wave of conflicting emotions hit him. The crisp autumn air should have felt liberating, yet it carried the weight of loss. His empire was secure, his name untarnished, but the price had been steep. The people he once trusted most were gone, their betrayals leaving scars deeper than he cared to admit. Logan poured himself into his work. Hunter Dynamics thrived under his leadership, as he implemented measures to safeguard the company against future threats. His personal assistant often remarked on how his energy seemed boundless, how he tackled challenges with renewed vigor. Yet behind closed doors, Logan wrestled with the emptiness left in the wake of his shattered personal life. He had always defined himself by his ability to control outcomes, to bend circumstances to his will. But this betrayal had forced him to confront his own vulnerabilities, the blind spots he had ignored in his relationships, the cracks in his foundation that others had exploited. In the solitude of his penthouse, Logan began to reflect on the man he had become. One evening, while reviewing the company's 5-year strategic plan, he stumbled upon an old photo buried in his desk drawer. It was from the early days of Hunter Dynamics, taken at a modest office party. Garrett stood beside him, both of them grinning with the reckless ambition of men who believed they could conquer the world. Elena was there too, her arm linked with his. Logan stared at the photo for a long time, grappling with the ghosts of what had been. The image was a reminder of how easily success could breed complacency, how trust could be weaponized against those who gave it too freely. Rather than retreat from the world, Logan chose to face it head-on. He began attending exclusive industry events again, not to network, but to reassert his presence. He wanted everyone to see that he was unshaken, that the betrayals he had endured hadn't diminished him, but instead forged a sharper edge. At one such gala, Logan found himself in a candid conversation with an old rival, Ilya. She was a formidable figure in the tech world, known for her no-nonsense approach and unflinching honesty. "I heard about what happened," Celia said, her voice low but direct. "Messy stuff." Logan gave a faint smile. "Messy, yes, but necessary." Celia studied him for a moment before leaning closer. "You know, Logan, you've always been brilliant at strategy. But even the best tacticians need someone they can trust." Celia pressed her lips against his ear, and he lowered his body to hers as she stroked his hair back from his forehead. Her words stayed with him long after the event ended. trust. It was a concept he had once taken for granted, but now it felt like an impossible luxury. Still, Logan realized he couldn't live in a fortress of suspicion forever. He needed to rebuild, not just professionally, but personally. And months turned into a year, and the shadows of the betrayal began to recede. Logan took up new hobbies: sailing, painting, even joining a running club. These pursuits weren't about distraction, but about rediscovery. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to focus on something other than his company. Through the running club, he met Nora, a sharp-witted architect with a quiet confidence that intrigued him. Unlike Elena, Nora had no interest in his wealth or status. Their connection grew organically, built on shared conversations during early morning jogs and a mutual appreciation for life's simpler joys. Logan was cautious, keeping his guard up, but Nora's patience and authenticity began to chip away at his defenses. When he finally shared the story of his betrayal, her response was measured, her advice thoughtful. "Betrayal says more about them than it does about you," she said softly. "But healing is your choice. You can either carry this with you forever or let it make you stronger." Despite the progress he was making, Logan knew there was one final loose end he needed to tie up: Elena. She had written to him from prison several times, each letter apologizing and pleading for forgiveness. Logan had ignored them all, unwilling to give her the satisfaction of a response. But now, with the dust settling, he felt it was time to face her one last time. When Logan arrived at the prison's visitation room, Elena looked older, her once vibrant appearance dulled by the weight of her choices. She smiled weakly as he sat down across from her. "Logan," she began, her voice trembling. "Thank you for coming." Krista first sat silent. He said nothing, his expression unreadable as he studied her. The woman who had once been his partner in life now seemed like a stranger. "I've had a lot of time to think," Elena continued, her eyes welling with tears. "I know I can't undo what I did, but I need you to know how sorry I am." Logan leaned back in his chair, his tone calm but firm. "Sorry doesn't change what happened. You made your choices, Elena. Now you're living with them." She nodded, wiping her tears. I hope someday you can forgive me." Logan considered her words for a moment before standing. "Forgiveness isn't for you, Elena. It's for me. And when I'm ready, maybe I'll find it, but not today." As he walked out of the prison, Logan felt an unexpected lightness. He had faced his past, confronted his pain, and emerged on the other side. Forgiveness might come in time, but for now, he was content to leave the past where it belonged, behind him. Back at his penthouse, Logan stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights twinkle below. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace. His life was no longer the meticulously controlled empire it had once been, but it was real, grounded in lessons learned the hard way. As Nora joined him, handing him a glass of wine, Logan realized he was no longer defined by betrayal or revenge. He was defined by resilience, by his ability to adapt and rebuild. The scars of the past would always remain, but they no longer held power over him. With Nora by his side and a renewed sense of purpose, Logan was ready to face whatever came next. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, that uncertainty felt like an opportunity, not a threat.